Welcome, hi everyone. Welcome to another Tashkeel talk. Today we're talking about art schools. There are quite a lot of art school deadlines that are still out there around the world. International students have up to June to apply for art schools for next year. So today we're going to talk to two of our staff members who have gone through the system, the art school system, one in the US, one in the UK. And we're going to have a little bit of talk about what the application process is. How do you choose the right school for you? What do you need to have in order to make a right impression? And if you're lucky enough to get to the interview stage, how do you prepare and what do you expect? So hopefully this will be useful for all those students who have just left high school, just left college, and have got art school on the horizon and are looking forward to possibly traveling abroad and starting their bachelor degrees in art or design. So today we're joined by the wonderful Education and Outreach Coordinator of Tashkeel, Azim Al-Ghussein. Hi, Azim.
Hi.
And what university did you go to do your degree?
So my undergrad was in the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, and my grad studies were in the Virginia Commonwealth University School of the Arts in Richmond, Virginia.
Fantastic. So you'll be all art schools USA. That is your specialist today. And also we're joined by Studio and Engagement Manager at Tashkeel, Tima Ouzden. Hi, Tima.
Hello, Lisa.
And what universities did you study at?
So I don't have an undergrad degree, so it's a good example for you not to be discouraged if you don't have one, if you wanted to do your master's. And I did my master's at the Royal College of Arts in London.
In London. So we've got UK versus USA. Starting with Azim. Azim, you very much went down the American route. Why was there a particular rationale behind choosing American universities to study both undergraduate and masters?
So I actually, before going to Chicago, I had a previous degree that I got in the UAE, and it was an American-based system. So I kind of, not only was I exposed to that very early on, in terms of the media that I consumed, there's a lot of American-oriented cultural facts, and that's kind of what I was responding to. And so even though Europe is still attractive and always has been, to pursue an art education, I kind of selected or was looking at a range of schools in which I felt like my cultural understanding of the world can be better used or employed, or kind of like how I can react to the world around me. That being said, that was what I believed then. Things have changed a little. I also think that language has something to do with it. So being able to speak English fluently obviously made it more feasible as a place to go. And I also, so when thinking of Chicago, the city itself, I had previously been, and that seemed like a very appealing, it seemed like a very appealing environment to be in. It was like a big city, but not as big as other big cities, relatively clean. And the only downside was the weather.
All right, we're just suffering a little bit of a signal problem with you, Azim, at the moment, but I think you made some really good points there. You stuck to what you're used to, the American system, sort of an education system that you're used to and familiar with, and maybe at the time you thought that that would help you adapt quicker, perhaps, to an American institution. Also, really important is the city. You've got to be really comfortable in the place that you're going to spend several years in.
Yes,
Tima, thanks. We'll come back to you in a minute, Azim. Tima, you studied in London, talking about cities that are easy to navigate. I don't think so. But the British, and I speak from experience, have a completely different culture to the US. So why did you choose Royal College of Art, or did Royal College of Art choose you?
There are a number of reasons. I actually was not even thinking of applying to a UK school. I applied to a bunch of American schools first. And I think maybe it was because, Azim and I were in the same fellowship with RISD. So I think in my head was like, RISD fellowship, go to US. And then kind of last minute, I think Khalid Mizena recommended actually. And he was like, you should also apply to RCA. And I was like, oh my God, there's a whole another, continent in the system. And I also, because, I would call myself a mature student in terms of age maybe. And I've been part of a lot of kind of experimental programs. So for me, I felt the British system maybe was better suited, self-driven. I wasn't sure I would enjoy more structured system. So I had an opportunity to go to California, to California College of Arts, or to RCA. So I ended up picking RCA because I felt it was a bit more open, and because I've been also freelancing for so many years and kind of self-driven. So I felt if it's more suitable for me. That's one of the things. And another one is geography. My family's here and my friends are here, so I wanted to be kind of closer. And there's also a lot of these connections between US and UK, obviously, and everyone kind of going back and forth. And really being a melting pot. I mean, I met so many people from, in UAE, you meet all these people from all these places, but in London, it was even greater. So for me, it was, a mix of, geography and also the system that it was a bit more open and experimental and self-driven, which suits my personality better. But for others, that's more difficult, and they benefit from a more structured kind of a maybe American system. So I think it's important to take into consideration your personality, the way your mind works, how you study. That's very, very, very important. It's not one is better than the other. It's just what fits you better and what you can make use of your time and resources better.
And a very good piece of advice about, thinking about how do you study? Are you more independent, or do you require a structure? Azim, do you felt that the American system was more structured and gave you the structure that you needed?
In the undergrad system, definitely. I felt like, especially it was at a time where I was younger and kind of didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but I knew that this was the general direction. And the school provided the kind of structure and system that allowed for, so the School of the Art Institute in that time, I could pick and choose courses in various departments to kind of make my own program, but they just had to be of a certain level. So I did have to think about the long term, but play an active decision in which direction I wanted to pick, as opposed to picking kind of like a lump set of courses that would entail a particular degree. And I think that was a very good, that was very good for me. Like it was just enough support, but still just enough decision-making to think about my future. In grad school, it was different. We were actually given a lot of freedom and a lot of time to pursue our own personal practice, which is necessary at that time. And it's kind of, it just has enough structure that you have to make your own structure. And I think when you get to that point in your practice, it's more feasible, but had I been younger when that was happening, it might have been very difficult.
Okay, so choosing the right course is obviously, integral to you sticking at the art school that you go to. And I know that there is often an opportunity to change courses and change modules. The American system in that regard is very different from the British system. Tima, you did a master's in sculpture, I understand. Why that particular course? Why not go down the road of the masters in curatorial practice that Manal Al-Duwayan did, or printmaking that Salama and Saeed did?
Well, I've already done a course, a really great course on curating, so that was shelved. I chose sculpture particular at RCA because in RCA it's taught under this umbrella of everything sculpture, because I'm also interested in sculpture and performance and writing and so on. So that's It gave me space to do all of those things without just, working with wood or metal and sculpture being connected to more materiality and kind of like classic sculpture. So for me, it was suitable because it was more open, but it still had a framework of thinking about sculpture as a medium of practice or way of thinking.
Okay, so broad enough, but structured enough for you to roam within the environs that the course offered. Azim, what was your experience of choosing the course? Did you choose the right course? Did you change, or?
So in undergrad, I actually originally studied graphic design in the UAE. And then when I finished, I actually realized that I had these great skills that I was very excited to use, but I don't think I had the professional venue or the vision of a future with those skills. I kind of wanted to use them differently than how I've been taught to. So that's kind of where going back to undergrad at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago allowed me to do that. And it was kind of there, like I said, you don't necessarily need to, you can pick from a variety of courses to create your own structure. And so I was able to focus on comics, I was able to focus on illustration, I was able to focus on drawing, and these were all the skills that I did want to develop because they were and then kind of think about how those could feed into a practice or a future that I did want to have. It felt like when I was in graphic design that all the paths were kind of put out before me and I wasn't as interested. In grad school, I picked the program knowing that there was some room for me to define my practice and not necessarily stick to a conventional way of making. The other thing that made me kind of really pick the right program was the kind of support that it provided. So it was a teaching assistantship. So if you were to get into the program, you were funded for your first year and you had a job as a teacher's assistant at the university level. And I had known at that time that education, particularly education in the arts, was something that I really wanted to take on, something that I wanted to bring back with me. And that was honestly the most appealing aspect of the program that I picked. I was in a very difficult position once I had gotten acceptances, but once I thought about what mattered to me the most, the answer was very clear, and I knew which school to pick.
Okay, and is that pretty unique to have that teaching aspect, that teaching module component to a graduate degree, a master's degree?
So various programs in the US have opportunities. What was particular about the program that I attended was that you receive funding. So, and if based on the results of the first year, you actually get given a course to teach in your second year. So that being as a huge component of the reason people apply is what makes that program unique. Other schools are kind of it's not necessarily something you would take on. Whereas in this program, it is something that you do take on. So you do have to have a teaching assistantship in your first year. You do have to kind of interact with the undergrads at the level of an educator.
I just want to sort of take a diversion at the moment. Talking about beyond the course, you travel halfway across the world, 7 hours, 13, 14 hours, even longer. And you are, you're embraced by this new educational institution. You're totally embedded in the course that you are pursuing. But it is really important, is it, to look beyond the walls of the college or the university that you go and study and really benefit from the surrounding cultural sector of that city, of that place, and really understand what lies ahead in terms of your career once you graduate. I mean, I didn't go to art school, I went to drama school and then university, but looking back, it's almost more important what you did outside those educational institutions, for me anyway, than what I did inside. But hey, that's just me. What about you guys? Did you venture out beyond the college walls?
I was actually discouraged to go to London by one of my mentors. You can say
Okay.
she felt that, because I'm interested in so many things, that it would be distracting for me while doing masters, because there's just so much in London happening. So she felt it would be very hard to like focus and just do that. Where I completely disagree with that. Part of the student experience is living in a city that offers you, one, student life where you meet other students. So a lot of the things you learn are not just from your tutors and professors and your classes and your dissertations. You learn from your peers in your program. You learn from your peers in the school and the department, or just in the school in general, which is very, very important. And there is also, life outside, collaborating with students from other schools, going to other exhibitions, going to concerts, all of that. So it's as, almost as important as what you're doing in the school is what you're doing outside, but also, again, thinking about maybe what kind of city is more suitable for you. Because, cities can be really exciting and seductive, and, so you need to be very careful as well. If you want to go somewhere smaller, if you want to go to like a big international city, it's a very, very important choice to make as well, because it will also, you will change as a person when you go away for 2 years and you study. And what changes you as well, not just the knowledge you receive and the things you go through to, get used to a new city, be by yourself, meet new people, but also it's everything that you experience from outside. So that's also something to keep in mind for sure.
I'm having flashbacks as you're talking.
I can tell from your face, yes.
Azim, you started off at the Art Institute in Chicago, yeah?
Yeah.
So Chicago, massive city, pretty imposing, but it was the right fit for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I have a one-track mind. So I am being in a big city. It can be distracting. I think that I was able to really focus on why I was there. I was very goal-driven at the time. And I scheduled everything. So like I had these like 2-hour excursions every week to kind of just walk around and see things. But other than that, I was very determined to work as much as possible. I knew that I had a very limited time there, and I also had this feeling of inadequacy. So I felt like I was always trying to overcompensate when making work. But I did feel like in the few moments that I did go or had a life outside of schoolwork in my undergrad years, Chicago was a great city to do that. It's very diverse. There were lots of, in terms of like talking about combating homesickness, Chicago is there are lots of things that I found that I got access to that were familiar. There's a huge Palestinian community in Chicago, great restaurants that like have food from every corner of the world. There's this amazing Iranian restaurant I remember that I used to go to a lot. And so there were, it allowed for that to happen when I needed it to. Richmond, on the other hand, I was fortunate in the other way. I had made your cohort and the people that you're with are your like closest friends. And I was very lucky. I was with a very good group of people. And in the many ways that Richmond, a much smaller city than Chicago, the things that it lacked in terms of familiarity, I found in friendship and community. And that was kind of, I think that there are different things to get out of different places. And if Richmond had many more attractive venues for me to go combat my homesickness, I maybe wouldn't have had the opportunity to make such good relationships with my peers.
In terms of applying to those universities, what's the application process like? What did you find was the most challenging aspect of the application process? If we could zoom into that, was it the personal statement that they expected, or was there another element of the application process that you found quite daunting? Tima? Do you want to?
I mean, I think all of it is daunting, and I'm just gonna put it out there. Don't think it's easy. A lot of it is really mundane stuff, getting your portfolio together and your bio and all the documents, reference letters, and so on. So a lot of it is very, kind of tedious. I guess the most difficult part, maybe it is the art statement, and different schools have different formats for it. So you need to adapt when you're applying to different schools. You need to adapt the statement. You can't send the same statement to every school because they kind of want, they're similar, but there are differences in those statements. And, imagine there are hundreds of students applying to the same school. So you also worry about how you stand out, because whoever is reading your application, they only have a piece of paper in front of them, and they have your portfolio, which doesn't mean you are, as an artist or person, are translated 100%. So I think that was kind of the most challenging part, and that's why maybe I would recommend making it as personal while remaining professional as possible when you write your statement, so you do really come across your interest as an artist and as a person, and why you think this is important for you and why you think it's the right school for you should come off in your artist statement quite clearly.
An objectivity and a maturity.
And kind of self-awareness, and also being, not just trying to impress, just like showing yourself and who you are, so they get an idea of like who you are, what you're about, what your interests are. You need to know, you don't have to know everything, of course. That's gonna change while you're in school, but they need to know maybe at least what you're interested in which direction you're veering, what your practice is maybe about.
You mentioned earlier that you had a mentor that told you not to go to London.
Yes.
Did that person also help you with the application process? A lot of people watching this might have their teacher helping them, or an artist that they know in the community giving them advice.
You would definitely, if someone is applying for school, you definitely need someone who's gone through it, or your teacher, or your professor, or maybe someone who's already gone to school to be kind of like your advisor throughout the process. It's really helpful from a very practical perspective, but also like psychologically it really helps. The person who told me not to go to London was not the person who wrote my recommendations. Because then I've already asked somebody else, that's why. But it's very, very important to find somebody you trust, whose opinion you trust, to maybe consult them, ask them questions, and ask their opinions, and send your bio to be read through, send your statements. Never, ever, ever send first draft of anything. You need to do it a lot of times until
exactly.
This is it.
Azim, when you look back into the portfolio that you submitted with your application to Chicago, do you have still fond memories, or do you shudder? Tell us about the portfolio aspect of the application process.
Yeah. I was very fortunate. I had just finished my first program in graphic design, and I had these projects that I had taken on personally that kind of made it clear to myself that what I wanted to do was outside of graphic design. So it seemed very clear at the time that what I need to show was what skills I do have and what kind of work I want to pursue. And then they have a limited, or like they have a recommended number. So it's just a matter of making sure that I allocate enough of each kind of work into that specific number, which is, I can't remember, somewhere between 10 to 13. But thinking about, I know that like there's some work that is very dear to me, but when I thought about what to include in my portfolio, I thought about what is it that I'm trying to show with this particular work, not what the work is about, more like what does this work show about my own practice. And that really helped, because before thinking that way, I felt like I didn't even know where to start. I had like 4 years worth of graphic design projects, and maybe they actually all say the same thing, but then there were these other drawings that said something else. So that was really important to me. And same thing goes for writing the statement. It's not just writing about your practices. What does the writing say about you? And that, so like kind of deciding what does this letter supposed to tell them, and that kind of makes it a little bit easier also on the aspect of, even if I didn't get in, I said very honestly and clearly what it is that I wanted to do. And if that wasn't right for the program, then that's a good thing, because that's not what I want. Like, I don't want to change myself to pursue something just to get into that school. Yeah, so I think it's just a matter of knowing what you want to show about what you do.
But that's easier said than done, isn't it?
Oh yes, no. No, it's so much easier said than done, but it makes a difference for you to clarify your intent to yourself. I think that's like the first step. A lot of, like Tima says, don't send the first draft, right? Ever. A lot of the times in the first draft, that's when I'm setting my intentions for myself, and getting your peers and people you trust to read over, even if they don't edit or do something much to what you provided them with. There is that opportunity to talk to someone about what it is that you're sending. That really helps clarifying something for yourself. Maybe they're not clear on it, but you'll be clearer on what it is that you're putting out there.
Yeah, no, very, very important. What about interview stage? Now, obviously at this time, many students that do get to the interview stage will be having their interviews perhaps online, through Zoom or other sort of platforms. Did you have online interviews, or did you have to get on a plane and fly there? What was your experience? Tima, do you want to kick off?
Yes, sure. I had mine on Skype, and to be honest, it's a blur because I just don't, I don't do interviews very well, or I don't remember them very well, I guess. They're quite intimidating as well, because usually you have maybe like the head of the program and 2-3 of the senior tutors. So it's really helpful. I mean, I wish I knew that before the interview. This is what I found out when I went to school already, that I'm dyslexic and dyspraxic. So doing something like interview, you can blank out and like mumble. So if I were to do it again, for example, I would have had maybe like cue cards. I mean, even if you don't have a learning kind of a disability or anything like that, because it's a high pressured, it's like 10-15 minutes or something like that, where you need to like through the screen make a right impression, answer all these questions, be on it. So maybe it's good to practice it with somebody. They will ask things like, why this school, why this program, what are you hoping to get out of it? And then they'll ask questions from your portfolio, looking at your work. So be like, tell us more about this work. And, then some questions are really difficult, or things you haven't thought of. So it's good to practice it. Maybe do like a mock interview, again, with those people who you trust, your peers, your mentors, whoever is generous enough to give you some time. And another great, maybe untapped resource is getting in touch with other students who've done the program. So maybe even before you apply, you start, I mean, maybe now it's late, but maybe it's for someone who's going to apply next year, it's useful. You identify the program schools you're interested in, and a lot of the schools on their websites can connect you to students from programs, so you can ask them questions. How's the campus lives? How's the program? What's the strength? What's the weakness? So, and they can also give you advice, for interviews or for applying and things like that. So that's a really, really, really wonderful kind of resource. And a lot of students are very helpful, they're just ready to help. And if someone says no, you move on to another person. And sometimes the program can also put you in touch with students who are happy to do that. So
that's a fantastic tip. Somebody who's been there, who's done that, who's got the t-shirt.
Yes.
And who is living around the corner from you, hopefully.
Yeah, they probably are. They're students, yes.
But did you feel, I mean, obviously you have a panel of people interviewing you, not just one person.
Yeah.
And there are certain procedural questions that they're asking you, but did you feel that they were throwing you challenging questions as they sort of gauged your ability?
I think there were one or two questions I was a bit not taken aback, but maybe did not expect. But then when I got into school and went to school, and I was talking to other students, they kind of asked the same questions almost to everyone. They're not the same, but they're tweaked. So there will definitely be an element of surprise, and it's fine to say like, oh, I need a minute to think of it, or I'm not sure how to answer it this time. It's never bad to say I am not sure. You're not meant to know everything on the spot.
Yeah, there's no right answer. You're talking about your own practice.
If you don't know at that moment, yeah, you say I'm that's a really interesting question. I'm not sure how to answer it. I'm actually going to think about it. Thank you for asking that question. You can do something like that instead of just pull something out of the air, which means nothing, because they'll see through it.
Yes. Azim, you obviously gave a good interview, not once but twice. Tell us about what do you remember from those interviews? Were they panels as well?
Yeah, so I actually got only interviewed for the graduate program, because when I applied for undergrad, since I had a previous degree, it was just a transfer, and they don't usually interview transfers. Okay. But with the grad program, it was several people. It was the chair, a faculty member, and a grad student who did the interview. And I myself, as a grad student, have been in on the interview for other people applying. And I agree with what Tima was saying. They're usually the same questions. And to be quite honest, sitting on the side of the panel, it's interesting to see that they're not looking for a right or wrong answer. It's actually to show the extent of your critical thinking. So in saying, for example, that you hadn't thought about that question before, and you would like a minute to think about it, that actually shows how you respond in a situation where something surprising is thrown at you. And basically that when you are answering a question, you show the extent to which you've thought this through. No one's going to
thinking.
Yeah, it's not about like them agreeing with you. It's them being interested in hearing the full extent of that thought. And I think it's just getting out of that, or it's difficult too, but that's why the mock interviews help. So like practicing with someone, but getting out of that mindset of I gave them the wrong answer, as opposed to I can elaborate more on that. I haven't thought that through, and that's totally okay as well.
Thank you very much, guys. I have to mention, of course, the wonderful Sheikh Salama bin Hamdan Al Nahyan Foundation, whose Salama bin Hamdan Emerging Artist Fellowship was the reason that both of you were able to take your masters in the respective institution. How do you feel, Tima, that it's informed the way you think, the way you work, even today?
Well, for me, the fellowship and going to school have been absolutely life-changing. It sounds really corny, but it really was life-changing for me. One is that I've been wanting to do masters for such a long time, probably for 15 years, and it took me a long time to get there. So that's a big dream come true. And also realizing that, there is no, for some people, I don't know if it's like you or not, I wouldn't attach maybe that adjective to it. For some people know exactly what they want to do early on, and they kind of head there, they put their building blocks and they get there. For others, it's more of a winding road. So for me, I've done so many very interesting things anything from publishing to fashion to design to curating, until I got to the fellowship and then discovered that I'm really interested in sculpture and performance and writing. So it was looking back and realizing that the tapestry of everything I've done brought me to this point, and kind of it all came together and kind of crystallized. It was this moment of like, everything I've done is here, and now it all makes sense, and I really love what it is and enjoy what it is, and I feel that there is value in it. And going forwards, I know this is what I'm taking with me, and that what I would like to share with others, whether it's through education or just sharing my work, or while working at Tashkeel and meeting other artists and doing various things. So it's absolutely worth it for me. I would say though that I would recommend whoever is thinking about going to grad school. I mean, I'm not talking about undergrad because I don't have that experience, so maybe I leave that to Azim. You need to be very honest with yourself why you want to go to grad school, because in the end, it's 2 years of your life. It's also a vast amount of resources and time. It's time away from your family, from where you live, from yourself, and time is a really precious thing. So you need to really know what is driving you to go to school, and just be very clear and honest about what you want to get out of it and why do you want to do it. There is kind of I've seen there's been kind of a movement of maybe undergrads taking like 1 year break, or not even, and going straight into master's programs, because the world is kind of uncertain, especially art world. So it was a way of maybe not knowing what to do in the between phase. So just going from school to school, which for some works really well, and for others it doesn't, makes them more confused and lost. So it should not be an easy and frivolous decision. I feel like you really need to think about it and really be sure why you would want to go to grad school. Yes.
Thank you. Azim, looking back on Chicago and Virginia, has it all been worth it? Would you recommend it to others?
I think that what Tima said about being honest with oneself is really important. I want to emphasize how a master's degree is not, I don't think that it's for everyone. I don't think that people should feel compelled to do so. If people feel like there are external pressures to do that, then that's something that we all should collectively address. It is a very particular kind of learning that happens in a master's program. It's very taxing on one's resources. I cannot emphasize enough how the Sheikh Salama Foundation really prepared me for it through the fellowship program. But if I had to do it on my own, it would have taken me many more years before I could even think of pursuing a master's program, even with the support available at the master's program I had gone to. So yeah, I think that it's kind of, you really need to think about where you're at in your practice and what going away for 2 years, like what that means you lose, what that means you gain in the program, because like Tima said, time is precious. Those 2 years that I've been away from my family, I changed, and that's really difficult to come to terms with when you're back. And so what you're getting in return, and how much you put of yourself into the program and how you develop your own practice is a big thing. Like, it's a big thing. So when I took that was always at the forefront of how I approached it. Like, how am I going to use my time? What am I going to learn? And fortunately, in retrospect, I can look back and say it was worth it. But I'm always very painfully aware of at what cost. And so, yeah, it's a very serious commitment. And it's also like, there's a lot of discomfort that comes with it, even while you're in it. So that's another layer to, like, sometimes something that happens abroad, like missing a birthday or not being there, or even professionally being irrelevant for so long. So, you know, when you're in your community, you're kind of always being seen, your work is being seen, and then you step away for 2 years and come back and people don't remember who you are. So there's that too.
There's
So yeah.
also the maybe something that's maybe not talked about unless, you know, maybe it's done privately, is and this is not to discourage in any way, shape, or form. This is just maybe to bring a little bit of awareness, is reintegration when you come back. First of all, integrating into a new place, you know, it's safe to say maybe it takes about 6 months until you feel like, oh, I know how to use the tube. You know, the amount of times I got lost and then I had to take, you know, I end up somewhere east and the tube is closed, and, you know, it's all these things are very difficult. Where you buy your things, how you get to school, new people, your support structures. So it will take you maybe like 6 months to get into the new city and school life fully where you feel comfortable. But also, as much as you've gotten used to being there and building a life, it's the coming back and reintegration back into your social life, your family life, work life. It's also, it's not easy. It's quite difficult, and it also takes time. So all these things need to be taken into consideration.
I also want to say that this is something that I know a lot of people come back from grad school go through, where like they come back and the second culture shock of coming back, it becomes too much. But in that sense, people actually start to suffer from the grass is always greener. So like they come back home and they think of the other place, the school, and they go back there and then they think of home, and it becomes this toxic cycle. So it's very good to kind of reorient yourself every once in a while and give yourself time. And that's it.
Thank you very much, Azim and Tima. Thank you for your honesty, really. I think the key here is be yourself, know yourself, because that's what's going to get you into art school. Don't pretend to be something you're not. And there isn't a right answer for everything. No. You are the answer, and have the confidence and the support around you to get you through that application process.